Projekt Moderní vinař vzdělávání pro úspěch na současném trhu je spolufinancován z Evropského sociálního fondu a státního rozpočtu České republiky.
Okay, so here we are again at the National Wine Centre. My name is Mike Maisie and I'm from Australia. I have been a winemaker both in Australia and in the Czech Republic, and it's been my privilege to live here in Brno for the last 9 years. What I'd like to do is to show you how to describe Czech wine labels, because for me personally it was a little bit confusing at the start, and I think some points need some explanation. But let's start with an introduction, and let's use one of the wines from the previous video. We have here a Merlot from Regina Acelli, and of course one of the most basic pieces of information is the vintage or ročník, and in this case it is 2011. Perhaps the second most important piece of information is the grape variety. So here we have Merlot. Now be careful, because in Czech the pronunciation is Merlot, but in international language we would say Merlot. And again we have this word barrique. This is a very Czech piece of information on a wine label. We would probably say something like oaked or matured in oak on the label. So that's enough of an introduction, I would say. But let's move on to the first point, which is wines with protected designation of origin, because most of the best Czech wines have legally protected areas where the grapes were grown and where the wine is made. So in this particular case, we have a few details of where the grapes were grown, and perhaps we can start with this phrase, Vinařský oblast. So this is the wine region. And in this case it's Morava or Moravia. The second piece of information is Podoblast. So in English we would say the sub-region, and in this case it's the Znojemská sub-region, or it's from Znojmo sub-region. The third point is Obec, and here we would say village or municipality, and in this case it's Dolní Kounica. This is the village. And finally, the last piece of information is the Trat, and here we would say the vineyard site or simply vineyard. And in this case, it's Šibeniční hora. Okay, so that's talking about where the grapes were grown, which is a very important part of Czech wine labels. Now, let's move on to the second point, wines with special attributes. One of the things you see on most of the best Czech wine labels is the phrase Vino s přívlastkem, which in English is wines with special attributes. And of course you know that there are a range of different classifications, so what might be useful for your customers is to describe them in terms of the German equivalents, because the German wine classification system is quite similar to the one in Czech Republic. So Cabernet is simply Cabernet. The next one would be Pozdní sběr, and this translates literally as late harvest, but unfortunately if you say late harvest to a customer, they might assume that they're having a sweet wine, because that's what we say in English-speaking countries, that a late harvest is a sweeter type of wine. Unfortunately that's not the case here, because of course the winemaker can choose to ferment all the sugar and make a dry wine. So be careful when you use the phrase late harvest. It's not the most clear phrase to use. What you could say instead is the wine has achieved quite a high level of ripeness in the grapes. After Pozdní sběr is Výběr z hroznu, and this means selection of grapes. And again, this is a classification where the wine can still be dry, even though it has achieved quite a high level of ripeness in the grapes. After Výběr z hroznu is Výběr z bobulí, so we would say selection of berries. So we're starting to get, of course, to the sweeter styles of wine. and then Vibir Cibeb, or special selection of dried grapes or raisins. And of course, you have beautiful dessert wines or sweet wines in the Czech Republic. So, ledové víno is ice wine made from frozen grapes, and slámové víno is commonly translated as straw wine. So here, fresh grapes are picked and then dried on straw mats for 3 to 5 months, so that the concentration of the grapes increases. The evaporation of water means that the grapes shrivel, they become smaller, and they concentrate all the sugar and all the acidity. So we're talking here about this classification of Czech wines. But perhaps the most important thing to remember about a label is the thing that will actually help you to sell the bottle. And here we talk about part 3, which is awards and certificates. Now, we're here at the National Wine Centre, which means that all of the wines here have been awarded according to the Salon Vin of Czech Republic, which means that they belong to the top 100 wines judged to be the best here in the Czech Republic. So when you have an award, tell your customers, because it means something that someone else, especially professional wine judges, have thought that your wine is something special. The second part of this is a certificate, and here in the Czech Republic we have an excellent new appellation system called VOC, which means that Znojmo, for example, have selected some of the best grapes and have created very strict requirements to produce very typical wines from this region. So that is also worth discussing with your customers. They've chosen the best grapes from this particular region to give the most typical and traditional wines. Good. So just to summarize, many things on a wine label: vintage, ročník, vina odrůda, or grape variety. We talk about where the wine is from, region, sub-region, village, and vineyard site, and we also talk about different classifications within the system, such as Cabernet, Bosnispia, Vibíř, Hrozno. Be careful. Sometimes it's best to describe these as having attained a certain level of ripeness, because it can be a little bit confusing. And finally, please tell your customers about the awards that your wines have won and about the certificates that guarantee that what you're getting is a typical wine from this wine region.